Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very, very senior and accomplished professional from Melbourne, Australia, Suzanne Glendenning. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Sue is the owner and founder of Quantum Results Coaching International. She's the co-creator of Imaginal Communities. She's the Master Results Coach, a leadership coach, and a Master NLP practitioner. So, Sue, before we talk about coaching, tell me about your own journey from the corporate world to becoming a coach.
Well, it was an interesting and slightly unexpected journey, I have to say. So, despite having a fairly successful career, and I thought at the time I was fairly happy there, I just came to realise that there was no balance in my life, for my family and to get all the things done that I wanted to get done. So I was passionate about getting the results and growing my portion of the company. And I had the purpose and the passion, but I was burnt out. So I made a huge decision, and I recognised that my family and other things were more important in my life, and I decided to step away from that role. And many people thought that was either brave or stupid, but it was a decision that I'm very glad I made. So somebody who I trusted and respected at the time suggested that I go into coaching. And I wasn't quite sure why at first. But when I went and did my study and, progressed through my study and learnt more about the modalities of coaching and saw the results with coaching, I realised that this was my passion and this was where I was meant to be. So the rest, as they say, is history.
Amazing. So let's now talk about the organization you founded, Quantum Results Coaching International. And my first question to you is, how do you define leadership, and how has your definition evolved over time?
That's a great question. And I think, although some people have indicated to me that they feel that leadership is about managing, and a lot of people confuse the two, and it's about being in control. In fact, it's not. And leadership, I feel, can have some management component, and it certainly needs to. But there needs to be support and guidance and direction and working as a team and understanding what other people's thought processes are, how they process information, and coming together for a desired outcome.
Very interesting. And based on all the work that you did as a leader, and now that you're working with many leaders, what in your view are some of the common challenges or obstacles you see individuals face on their path to leadership?
I think from that perspective, it's actually not understanding what leadership really means. The implications of being a strong and influential leader. And it can be a leader at any level. Sometimes people consider leaders to be at the top of their field, but it may be an up-and-coming leader. So, and a lot of managers, I think, have their focus on their own model of the world. And they sometimes don't understand that other people have specific needs and specific filters, the way they process information. And they also have different values and different beliefs, and that's really important to acknowledge. And if the values are not aligned, then it's extremely hard to have a united and very effective team.
Very interesting. And how do you approach a number of the people who are resistant to change or skeptical about the value of leadership coaching?
A lot of that is resistance to change is fear-based across the board, and it can come from their own feelings of uncertainty or their own limiting beliefs, which are negative beliefs that we hold in our subconscious around their ability to be a good leader. And simply controlling or managing a team, I don't think will give you strong and sustainable results. It doesn't bring your leadership skills to the fore. So a good coach can support you through that and keep you accountable. And that's a huge thing. Trust and accountability are massive in coaching.
Right.
But a good coach will guide you, and not try to manage you or manipulate you or control you. So anyone who is skeptical about the value of leadership coaching probably hasn't experienced working with a good leadership coach. So they just might be afraid sometimes too that the mirror is held up to them, and that they see what they are and who they are and not what they're pretending to be. So a little bit of imposter syndrome.
Correct. But the other interesting part is that over the last 3 years, given the pandemic and the changes that have come on account of work from home or now hybrid working, how do you see the role of leadership changing? Because I've spoken to many leaders, and they said one of the most difficult times in their lives has been the pandemic, because they've had to keep the flock together. They've had to deliver results. They have to keep stakeholders happy. So I'd love to get your thoughts.
Look, we've all experienced change. I mean, it's been a global thing over the last few years, and learning to work remotely. I mean, some people are already doing it, but for many people, it was a learning curve. And the reasons behind the need to work remotely, I think many have not faced before as well. So, but leadership is essentially the same. Whether you're in the room with people or whether you're on screen with people, a good leader has great rapport with their team. And sometimes building rapport when you are working remotely and you're not engaged physically in the same space can be a challenge for some people, but it doesn't need to be. And I think the expectations and the desired outcomes of projects are really still the same. You're working on the same desired outcome, the same end result. So it's just the process that's different. So it's just getting used to something that's a little bit different. And being clear about expectations is important on how to deliver the information, and sharing all of that is something that a coach can work on with you as well. So great communication is absolutely critical, but it's not understood by many.
Interesting. And my next question is that, there are emerging leaders, there are senior leaders. My question is, how do you handle coaching someone who's already in a significant leadership role versus someone aspiring to be a leader?
That is so interesting, because every person is different. Everybody is different. And for me, all my clients are unique, and I see them that way. So people who are already in a leadership role, they'll obviously already have the experience of working with a team. But anybody who is not may have the experience of working in a team, but not leading a team, and having that responsibility and understanding how important it is to maintain, a healthy culture. So it doesn't automatically make you a good leader, having already been in that role. But we can all learn and grow, and we have to look at what's working and what's not. So you have to come in with fresh eyes. If you're an up-and-coming leader, you come in with fresh eyes, a fresh approach. Understand that you're still learning while everyone else is still learning. But it's looking again at the same desired outcome, and being clear on what you want, and being clear as a team on what you want.
Correct. The other aspect that is, become so popular now is the whole subject of diversity, equity, and inclusion. What role does DEI play in leadership, and how do you address this in your coaching?
This is a really compelling topic, and one that's being addressed much more openly right now. And leadership roles should be open, I believe, to the best possible person. It doesn't, like race, creed, gender, color. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters. It's about the right person for the right role to fit within that team to get the right result. And I think the sooner the world learns this, the better. So instead of, saying, well, we don't have many women in leadership in this company, therefore we need a woman to take over this new management role. If she's not the right person, it doesn't work.
Correct.
Equally, a woman shouldn't be excluded from the role. or
Correct.
somebody based on any of the other, areas that we've spoken about. And leaders, I mean, world leaders, industry leaders, our educators, parents, all of them, all have a responsibility, I think, and an opportunity to educate the up and coming generations in industry, in governance roles, and in all areas of commerce. So with regard to my own coaching sessions, I engage with my clients around this if it's appropriate to discuss the topic, if it's something that they want to talk about. Otherwise, people are just people to me. I don't see anybody any differently. But I've just finished reading a book by a dear friend of mine, Sandra D'Souza, on bias to equality, and that's something I can recommend everybody looking at in this area.
Certainly. And the next question that, again, I've seen the last few years become a buzzword seems to be authentic leadership. I'd love to get your perspective on how can leaders maintain their authenticity while also evolving their own style and approach?
Look, we can all do this, and we all should be doing this, being authentic. It's so important to look at who you are and how you are, and staying authentic, it's just a given. It should be an expectation, I think.
Right.
There's no need to hide behind that mask every day, and and there's no need to. It's like referring to COVID and using our masks for protection. We all have our own style and our own approach, and I think whilst continuing to be aware of others may have a slightly different approach, it's about being who you are, as I said, and how you are, showing up authentically, and you do this with respect and staying strong to your values.
Okay. One more question related to coaching, and then I want to. There's some next few questions are about coaching for you from your perspective. You decided to move out of the corporate world because of your work-life balance, and you also now talk to people about burnout and work-life balance. How do you address these issues with your coachees? I
actually don't believe in work-life balance. This is one of my favorite topics. I have written articles on this, and I've done other podcasts about this. It's about life balance. It's your whole life. You don't break it into segments. You don't have your work and then the rest of your life. It's your whole life.
Correct.
And it's about bringing your whole life into balance, as I said, and not breaking it up into segments and trying to deal with each of those segments separately. And so many people try to do that. So we should strive for overall balance and being mindful of our health in there as well, and our time with our family. But it's amazing how often people still say, work-life balance. But it's about, I work with my clients on understanding the importance of keeping our lives in balance and what happens when you tip out of balance and the impact that has on you. And that sometimes happens, but we have to recognise this, and we have to look at what we need to do to bring ourselves back into a happier existence. So with regard to recognising burnout, you mentioned burnout, it's about understanding what causes it, I think, and what we have done to contribute towards creating it, because we do create a lot of it ourselves. So it's acknowledging that and being accountable for that. So it's taking responsibility for our role in burnout, and it's a great way to achieving a much happier and healthy lifestyle. So first acknowledging, what did I do to create this? So what can I do to change it? And it is often within your power to do so. If you're struggling with that, find someone to support you. Find a good coach, or find somebody who can support you and help you maybe change your thinking and change your behaviours. And the kind of language we use around that is very important as well. It's about our mindset. So I sometimes talk about toward language and away from language. So are you moving towards what you want, which is a happy, healthier lifestyle and life, or are you moving away from what you want, which is burnout and struggling with balancing the work and balancing everything else? So there's a very clear distinction between those two. And once you grasp the concept of having overall balance and being aware of your own mindset, your own responsibility, then you'll find life is much different.
Wonderful. Thank you. My next question is about you now, Sue. From the corporate world, you decided, because of life balance, to become a coach. How has your background supported your coaching philosophy, your style, and your values?
Well, my personal background was very strong and supportive, so I was incredibly fortunate there. And values are important to me. As I said, working with honesty and trust and integrity are absolutely critical to the way I coach. And that's what I bring to my clients, and that's the space that we create together and we work in. So I value the trust that my clients put in me, and I know that that is reciprocated because it shows in the results that they get, because we're able to sometimes deep dive into some very difficult areas and make it work. I've actually been told that I'm a no BS coach, as they would say, no nonsense. So I will hold people accountable to what they say they want, but I will completely support them on that journey towards positive change.
Great response. Thank you. My next question is more about people who shape each one of us. We are all influenced by human beings as we grow, as we evolve. My question is, how were you shaped by people in your life, and how are they influencing you as a coach today?
Well, I was very fortunate to come from a strong and supportive family who encouraged me to strive and to achieve my goals, or what I believed were my goals at the time. And as I said, values are very important to me, and they come into my everyday life. So I've taught my children to live with strong values and to support their values, to live out a happy and authentic life. And some of the people that I've been associated with through my career have not always been good role models, and some have been. So it's great to be able to take the best from each. You can learn from everybody. And there are times when I look back and I think about something that I've learned, and I think, maybe that's not the way I would personally want to show up now. I'm going to do things differently. I will model differently. I will be different to that. So you can get great lessons, even if it initially seemed negative. There's always something great to learn from somebody.
I have two more questions on coaching. You live in a very, very multicultural country. And I have often seen, culture, whether it is organization culture, the culture of this community that you live in, the culture of the family that you come from. My question is, how does culture impact coaching? I
think culture impacts on the coaching experience because we must work, as coaches, we must work to the cultural beliefs of our clients whilst taking them on their journey of change. So it's really important to be respectful in that space, have an understanding in that space, and have open, honest dialogue and work with people in that space accordingly.
Okay. And given the fact that, now the new generation, the millennials and the Gen Zs have now started to come into positions of influence and power in organizations. And I do believe that the young leaders, millennial Gen Z leaders, are bringing in a breath of fresh air into most companies. What areas, in your opinion, do these young leaders need to be coached in?
Well, millennials have the reputation of being obsessed with social media, and whilst it may have some validity somewhere, they're also incredibly open to change, and they exhibit an interest in world events and issues such as climate change, which I'm also very interested in. I don't personally work with Gen Z often, but I mean, they've been affected by the change of our social and our work structure by COVID, probably more than most. And it's had a huge impact on that particular group. So if a coach is working with millennials or Gen Z, they should have initially that mutual trust, or ongoing that mutual trust. But be open to the conversation about what the person wants with their coaching and what their desired outcome is, because may be slightly different. So be open to being in that space and having that communication. No different from any other client. You know, as I said, people are just people. But removing some of the boundary conditions of their thinking sometimes will help open up that honest dialogue that you need to have, so you can learn new ideas and new ways of thinking and learn to just progress in the way that they're choosing to.
Wonderful. And my last question for you, and this is for the many, many people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your own amazing journey, Sue, and all the work that you've been doing as a coach, what would you say are 3 lessons you would want our viewers and listeners to take away from your own journey and from our conversation?
So many. Do I just get 3?
Well, if you can, otherwise.
All right. I think the first one would be honest. Be honest with yourself and others.
Okay.
What do you want and why do you want it? Your why is very important. So you delve into that. Have real clarity about, you know, what you're wanting. And I think you have to also think about when you talk about your why, what do I want and why do I want it? It's what will that get for you? You know, how will you feel when you have it? How will that change your life? And it's important to take those extra steps. So they must align with your values, and you must be congruent with it. So it's not only best for you, but best for other people and best for our world. So honesty is probably the first one. The next one is one of my favorites, and that's communication. So communication is critical to every interaction we have. And understanding how to communicate effectively to achieve your desired outcome is absolutely essential for both personal and business discussions. But it's not only clear dialogue, you know, it's about what we call, you know, body language. Most people are familiar with that. And that impacts on the results you get. But it's also your self-talk. So it's your discussion with other people, but it's your self-talk. What are you saying to yourself? What's that little voice inside telling you? And are you listening to it? Negative, maybe you need to go and get some help.
Correct.
It's also around tonality, understanding, because most of us are auditory visual, so we're either hearing or we're seeing something in some form. So if I said to you, "Oh, what are you doing?" That's an inquiry. It's a question. I'm interested. But if I said, "What are you doing?" That's a challenge, potentially critical. So we need to be very mindful of our tonality and our language and how we're presenting and what we're saying. But again, how we communicate with others and how we're communicating with ourselves. Listen to that little voice.
Yeah.
And the third one is around, people talk to me about being stuck. They say, I'm just stuck in my thinking and I'm stuck in, my habits. And I think if you're stuck in your thinking and you're feeling overwhelmed, which is another word that comes up quite often with work and personal challenges, that just definitely get some help from a qualified coach. And it's important to engage with someone with who you have alignment and with whom you've already had some dialogue and you understand what they do. And that's why I personally offer a complimentary introductory session, so we can have a little chat and get to know each other. And when you choose a coach that you trust, choose a coach who is fully qualified and holds the space for you to be honest and support the change that you want to change, that you want to make, and will help you work through all of those issues that you might have. So when again, suffering from overwhelm or you feel stuck, just have a think about, well, why do I think this is? What do I think is happening for me? What would I like to have it differently and why? How would I like it to change? Okay, who do I need to speak to about that?
Well said. And on that note, and your 3 wonderful lessons, the first one being, be honest. Your why is very important. The second one, which is so critical and so important, is where you say communication is critical. And the third one is, if you're stuck or overwhelmed, get help. Thank you, Sue, for talking to me about your journey. Thank you for talking to me for so many different aspects of coaching. Thank you also for talking to me about some of your own philosophies and some of the areas that you think young leaders may need to be coached in. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.